This may have been a game, but it was not something you played. And Kirito, along with 6,146 other players, have managed to survive the floating castle high up in the sky, Aincrad. But before he reached Underworld in Sword Art Online Alicization, the Holy World Tree was waiting for him in the world of ALfheim Online. This is the journey so far, Road to Alicization, featuring Fairy Dance. In the previous video, I have went through the entirety of Aincrad arc, and this time we're going into the arc that is deemed to be controversial by many. During this entire recap, I will be mentioning key details that was not adapted very well into the anime that caused these issues, and will also explain certain things that will hopefully clear your minds a little regarding the second arc of the series, Fairy Dance. So without further ado. About 2 months after Aincrad was cleared, Kirigaya Kazuto woke up from a nightmare where his happy daily life with Asuna on floor 22 suddenly crumbled apart. While his sister was training outside, having flashbacks of leaving for training on the day he dived into Aincrad and other memories throughout, Suguha didn't realize Kazuto had been watching her. Upon Kirito making a remark about her shinai, aka kendo sword, being very light, he challenged her to a kendo match. While Kirito would indeed lose the fight against an actual kendo practitioner, a good one at that, he still managed to surprise Suguha with his quote-unquote funny but confident stance. Kirito tried sheathing the shinai to his back, similar to what he did back in SAO, much to Suguha's confusion, and realized what he was attempting. This is kind of a habit of his throughout this series, and you will see more of this in the future. And while this, Kirito having solid sword skills, despite his funny technique, causes people to have an issue with Fairy Dance very early on, but you'd be surprised to know that this is exactly how a human brain works. Practice leads to skill, and while Kirito's technique may be hilarious to an actual master, after 2 years of sword fighting to survive, his brain is hardwired in a manner that creates certain reflexes. In fact, people in sports tend to use mental training, aka imagining their art in their mind, as an important part of their training, very commonly to hardwire their brains to certain things. But with that bit of trivia out of the way, upon his visit to the hospital to see Asuna, who was among the 300 people who survived but could not log out of Aincrad, Kirito learned that Asuna was going to be married with Sugou Nobuyuki, who was working with her father, the CEO of Rect, the company who bought out SAO servers from Argus under the Full Dive Technology Research Division. When Asuna's father left the room, Sugou showed his true colors and told Kazuto to never visit or have contact with Asuna or her family ever again. Suguha, who learned Kazuto was actually her biological cousin while he was in SAO, comforted Kazuto back home and told him not to give up. As Kirito was recalling her words the next day, he received a message from the greedy merchant Egil with the picture of a girl who looked exactly like Asuna. Upon learning that this picture was taken in a game called ALfheim Online in a location that players reached via an exploit that was patched after the picture got out, Kirito decided to dive back into the virtual world with his old school nerve gear. The fact that Rect, the company Sugou worked at, was in charge of ALO, also made him even more suspicious. Knowing Sugou was familiar with his account name Kirito in Latin letters from SAO due to his involvement, he created his character, a Spriggan race, in full black equipment with the same name but in Japanese kana instead, which was omitted from the anime. And another thing that was omitted from the anime was that Kirito did not have such a similar look to his real life /SAO avatar, though this can also be attributed to the light novel artist Abek, who also drew him very similarly to his real self. Once logged in, ensuring the logout button was in place, he found Yui as the item he saved into his nerve gear and brought her back to life, which converted her into a navigation pixie thanks to Cardinal, the same system that oversaw Aincrad, recognizing the code in ALO. He quickly stumbled upon multiple players, a group in red and 2 players in green. The boy in green gets killed by the Salamanders in red, but Kirito managed to help the girl, the Sylph, who introduced herself as Leafa. With the sword skills and fast reflexes he obtained back in Aincrad, that transitioned almost perfectly into ALfheim's VR environment, unlike the real world. Kirito informed the fairy in green that he was searching for the World Tree, Yggdrasil, and Leafa decided to help, though warning him that the road would be deadly. but you need to do more than that to intimidate an SAO survivor, as Kirito remained unfazed and thanked her. Shortly after, Leafa logged out and Suguha woke up from her dive, thinking about the quote-unquote weird Kirito guy. On top of the world tree, Fairy King Oberon, the in-game avatar of Sugou Nobuyuki, was talking to Asuna, referring to her as Titania. He mentioned his memory-altering experiments, he mentioned he could do the same to Asuna, but that it would not be fun. He left, and Asuna started crying in her cage. The next day, when Kirito and Leafa started their journey, Oberon visited Asuna again. After Asuna mentioned Kirito from SAO, Sugou decided to mention his exchanges with him and that he believed Kazuto would never visit a VR world again to bring down her spirits. Unlike what he thought this would do though, inside, this actually encouraged Asuna, as this was the first instance in over 2 months of her entrapment that she heard about Kirito and the fact that he was alive. As Oberon was leaving the cage, Asuna, watching from her mirror that cancelled the distance-based motion blur effect of the game, memorized the code to the cage. And much to the claims of people who claim Asuna became a damsel in distress in fairy dance, as early as this, as she discovers she has a reason to live, a happy future to look forward to, Asuna actively starts the motions herself that result in her breaking free. And of course, while the anime does showcase her rebellion, it is still explored lightly if you're interested in reading the source material for all the details to enjoy for yourselves, which I strongly recommend by the way. Amazon affiliate links to both Volume 3 and Volume 4 of Sword Art Online featuring the entire Fairy Dance arc will be in the description down below. Meanwhile, Kirito and Leafa decided to take a break out in the neutral zone. One remained logged in to guard the other because of a chance their bodies may get attacked in a PvP heavy game like ALO. Leafa logged out first. She wanted to check on Kazuto in his room, but remembering that he was going through a hard time with Asuna, she went back to the kitchen and prepared a sandwich for him instead. While taking a bath, forgetting about Kazuto, she thought about the feelings she was growing towards this weird Kirito person. When both Kirito and Leafa were done with their rotating breaks, Kirito sensed that they were being watched but could not find anything of significance. They took off. But being careless hit them in the back as they entered the caves inside the mountains. 12 Salamander players, the same faction that Kirito and Leafa had pushed back the previous day, was now ready to attack them, and they had the numbers. Being dominated by the formation consisted of tanks, DPS and healers, and the only escape route being the lake that had high-level monsters impossible to defeat without proper support, Leafa suggested to surrender and start again from the Sylph town of Swilwain. But Kirito refused. Without hesitation, he noted that he would not let any party members die as long as he was alive. Yui suggested Leafa to use all of her mana to block the attack on Kirito, and with the time bought, Kirito used his illusion magic to transform into a monster looking like the Gleam Eyes. Breaking their formation out of their shock, out of their fear, was the doom of the Salamander squad. After a while, Leafa logged out since his friend Recon was trying to contact him. Recon let her know that Salamanders were about to kill the Sylph and Kate Sith leaders Sakuya and Alishiru respectively with a huge army. Leafa suggested that Kirito should switch sides and work with Salamanders to reach the top of the world tree, but he refused and said he would never use a friend for his personal benefit. They then decided to rush to the treaty location between Sakuya and Alicia to aid them during the incoming ambush. When they reached the location, however, they were only 50 seconds away from the commencing of the attack, so Leafa told him to run away, but Kirito refused once again, telling her that running was not his style and not backing down yet again in his quest towards reaching Asuna. Just as the Salamanders were attacking, Kirito landed in a smashing manner, lifting up so much dirt that they decided to wait. He then called for their commander and bluffed that he was there as an ambassador of the Spriggan Undine Alliance, thus if Salamanders were to attack, all 4 races would wage war at them. General Eugene, the strongest player in ALO, the commander of Salamanders, refuted Kirito's claims due to him having no guards as well as possessing horrible gear, and said he would only believe him if he were to hold him off for 30 seconds. Their duel started the moment Eugene reflected the sun with a sword at Kirito's eyes to take advantage without mercy. As Kirito hastily tried to parry, Eugene's demonic sword Gram, that could phase through weapons once per cooldown period, went right through Kirito's blocking attempt and hit him straight. As the fight continued and 30 seconds had passed, Eugene answered Kirito's pointing out with that he had changed his mind and now he was gonna kill him. As he kept damaging Kirito further and taking the upper hand more and more, Kirito used a smokescreen spell to buy himself time and grabbed Leafa's sword in the distraction. While everyone aside from Leafa assumed Kirito had run away, as he was, nowhere to be seen after Eugene cleared the smoke, Kirito crashed down onto Eugene directly from the sun's angle to remain unseen. With utilizing two swords, Kirito took advantage of the phasing ability cooldown of Eugene's sword to block all the attacks with the secondary hand and used this to defeat Eugene and send the Salamanders back. As they left the scene for the World Tree, Asuna got out of her cage using the password she memorized earlier. She was already exploring above the World Tree's secret areas as Kirito and Leafa reached the central city where the tree's base was and were logging out due to scheduled maintenance. The next morning, Kazuto realized Suguha was quite sleepy and upon learning she went to sleep around 4 AM, he told her not to stay up that late, but then realized he wasn't one to talk as he also hit the sack around the same time coincidentally. Asuna found a map of the area and proceeded to the experiment lab where Suguha was messing with the emotions of the other SAO survivors hidden from the government. She also found the GM console in the lab but could not manage to log out before she was caught by scientists working there. They tried to violate Asuna, but as one of the two who contacted Suguha returned, he reported that Suguha was pretty damn angry and that he ordered them to return her to her cage. When she was returned, Asuna revealed that she stole an admin card from the console. Having returned from his hospital visit to Asuna, this time with Suguha on his side, who had contemplated about the feelings she had for Kazuto a while ago back at the hospital, Kirito logged into ALfheim and found Leafa to be quite sad there waiting for him. Kirito suggested that she cried instead rather than burying all the sorrow, and Leafa did cry. After she felt good again, they headed towards the base of the World Tree. Kirito asked about how to get up top, but Leafa quickly explained that it was pretty much impossible by climbing or by flight, and the one trick used by 5 players to take a photo of the top had been quickly patched by the panicking developers, which just shows how much of a cat and mouse chase game development or software development in general is. You have no idea that something is breakable until someone actually breaks it. Keep that in mind because I'll be referring to that in a bit. But all of a sudden, Yui mentioning that she detected Asuna on top of the tree caused Kirito to completely disregard everything Leafa just said and he launched upwards. Desperation clearly hearable in his voice, Kirito kept bumping to the invisible barrier blocking his way until Yui managed to reach Asuna for a second using the warning mode. This led to Asuna dropping the admin card down to where she hoped they would be able to find it. Requiring a console to use the card with, he decided to take the Grand Quest, which is the challenge of the tree, the only path upwards that even huge raid parties can't succeed through. And Kirito, as a single player, bound by the limits of the game, couldn't either. While waiting for his respawn timer as his respawn orb, his Remain of Light, floated within the tree, he contemplated if he could overcome the rules of the system once again. Memories of Aincrad flashed in front of his eyes. He then realized more guardians floating around him, only to find out that Leafa entered the tower, swiftly dodging every single enemy, grabbing his Remain of Light and barely escaping from the scene to revive him outside. Kirito, absolutely defeated, thanked her and told her not to do that again and proceeded to head back to the tower. Leafa insisted for him to stop, but Kirito didn't listen. He said he needed to go. He said he needed to see Asuna. And with that, Leafa had just realized that it was Kazuto, his brother, the person who she had feelings for, but buried them in the past due to being family, was the person behind the avatar Kirito that she was growing feelings for all this time. She gasped one last time, "Big brother," and logged out without a single word. Kazuto knocked on Suguha's door only for her to lash out, leaving both kids in realization of the messed up situation they are in, full aware of everything. And while I planned this series as a recap, I have to break the format for this bit. While people do blame Fairy Dance for controversial topics, I would advise you to watch this scene from the end of episode 22 for yourself. As I said, Both kids are aware of the situation. Kirito, already defeated by his endeavor in the tree, just got lashed out at by Suguha, who is just a victim of a very unfortunate series of events, growing to like him, but moving on due to their relationship, only to love a stranger on the internet, who turns out to be her brother that she had no way of knowing beforehand, making her go through the entire pain once again. There are questionable choices in this arc, the Asuna tentacle scene or Sugo's maniacal actions among those, but for all the shit this arc gets, this heartfelt moment of two broken kids is not among those moments. Not this scene where they are both at their complete lowest due to a series of significantly unfortunate events. Before moving on, if you still have doubts that fairy dance is controversial because of Sugu and Kirito's relationship, I strongly advise you to watch the scene I just mentioned again. Nothing else I can say would be more effective than listening to and watching the reactions of the two characters on the screen. Sitting at her doorstep, Kirito recalled the time he discovered the truth about his family. The time he had distanced himself from Suguha for that reason. The time he had used online gaming to run away from this reality and eventually SAO. He also remembered Suguha's face after he woke up at the hospital, and that he promised to make it up to her for all the distance he had put before the incident. But he also realized that there was nothing he could do in the situation for her sake. He told through the door that he would be waiting for her in ALO and left. Feeling bad for how she acted towards Kazuto for circumstances he had no control over, Leafa decided to log back in to meet him. While she was thinking what to say, Recon found her, and seeing her in such a down mood, he tried to cheer her up by confessing his love. That kinda did the trick in a way that he was not hoping for. Leafa met with Kirito and they decided to have a fight to express their feelings, aka to just vent. She recognized the funny stance he had during their kendo duel, and she realized where it all came from and why he was so confident with it. As Leafa was going for the hit from above, she let go of her weapon as she let herself go as well, but Kirito caught her. They apologized from each other and Kirito explained that he still wasn't back from Aincrad mentally and that he wouldn't be able to until he came back with Asuna. And until then, he just didn't know how to handle anything. Without losing time, Kirito, Leafa and Recon decided to raid the tree again, with the two sylphs staying back for healing while Kirito broke through the swarms, but the Guardians had a different aggro mechanic and focused on the healers instead. Recon sacrificed himself with a self-destruct spell, taking out a huge chunk of enemies, but it still was not enough for Kirito to reach the end. At the last second, Sakuya and Alicia Ru arrived with their armies to support them. Kirito blazing through the enemies, with his eyes glowing yellow, just like the day he defeated Kayaba, managed to reach the top of the tree, but the end gate remained closed. Yui checked the door and realized it didn't even have a quest flag, that the door was not even meant to be opened. Just when Guardians caught up to Kirito, they remembered the card dropped by Asuna and managed to get inside using that. And beyond the branches of the World Tree, they reached Asuna. Yui mentioned that in order to log Asuna out, they needed to find the system console, and just when they were about to head for it, the gravity effects multiplied, collapsing all of them and ejecting Yui from the area as the cage turned into a black void. Fairy King Oberon had blessed them with his presence. He chained Asuna and impaled Kirito to the ground, who was still fighting against the altered gravity. Proceeding to torture him, Oberon decreased the pain absorber level from 100% to 80%, also mentioning that under 30% it would start harming his physical body in the real world. As he continued to rip Asuna's equipments, Kirito kept fighting against the pain and gravity, but eventually whited out. He went through the same feelings as he did when he first challenged and lost against the tree, but in the end, there was nothing a player could do against an administrator. Even the strongest player had no power against Oberon, who controlled the entire system, unless you have a higher authority ranking. Kayaba suddenly sounded off out of the whiteness. Kirito replied that he was gonna accept the reality he could perceive. Kayaba mentioned that his words made a mockery of their fight back in Aincrad, that the reality he was giving into was the reality set by the system rules, the reality that he once denied. Kayaba disappeared, providing Kirito with his credentials for that one time, the only set of credentials that stand on top of everything and everyone in this world. Oberon tried to summon Excalibur to no avail as Kirito demoted him to the lowest rank, and he proceeded to summon it in return and handed it over to Oberon, grabbing his own sword in the process. With the pain absorber leveled down to a 0, he cut off Oberon's wrist, cut him in half, and ended his time in this world. Finally reuniting with Asuna, Kirito once again apologized for being powerless in the situation, as he was only saved by Kayaba's VR ghost assisting him with his credentials, but promised to thrive for everything Asuna sees in him. Kirito told her that he would visit her in the hospital as soon as they are out, and released Asuna from the game. He called out for Heathcliff, and Kayaba, or rather his afterimage, responded. Kirito thanked him, but Kayaba refused, saying that there was a price for his help. He brought up the seed and handed it over to Kirito to do whatever he wants with it once he understands what it is. Kayaba then disappeared, sending Kirito back to the cage where Yui was. Explaining what happened, Kirito logged out at 9:07 PM and headed for the hospital to Asuna. However, Suguha was waiting for him at the hospital parking lot. No focus, no power, completely deranged as to what he just went through. His eyesight was completely off due to being impaled and the pain absorber being set to 0, actually harming his physical body. Kirito had no trouble turning the tables, but couldn't take his life at the end, leaving the guy for authorities to handle as he rushed to Asuna. And the duo finally met for the first time in real life. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of my Road to Alicization series journey so far, featuring Fairy Dance Arc. For part 3 of the series featuring Phantom Bullet, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. As always, all the related material, Blu-ray and the light novels volume 3 and 4 can be found below in the description via Amazon affiliate links. Huge thanks to my patrons as usual for supporting me, and thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.